Hello there. Greetings. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that I'm here. So, welcome to this Leo full moon forecast where we're going to go over the main astrological themes for the second half of this lunar cycle. The full moon in Leo, we're talking about tropical and Western astrology, is going to be on the 1st of February. And we're going to look at the time period between the 1st and the 16th of February in this forecast. So, first and foremost, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. If you're new here, thank you for stopping by. Of course, let me get all of this housekeeping out of the way. If you find this content valuable and inspiring, if you utilize it for your own guidance on a regular basis, maybe consider subscribing, hitting that like button, sharing, commenting. All of those things help the channel grow. This is not a monetized channel. I do not make money off of this channel, wherever you're watching it from. This is purely to reach a wider audience in order to let people know about my services and if they want to work with Catalyst Energies in their own spiritual development. So, and those services are astrological readings, intuitive readings. I do distance work, and of course my brick and mortar is licensed body work, Reiki attunements, Reiki treatments, Reiki classes, and then I'm also doing craniosacral therapy along with massage therapy. So that's my day job, so to speak. So, but thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so much. So before we get into the nitty gritty of the astrology of the next 2 weeks, which is pretty intense, I'm sure I'm not the only person talking about this full moon and everything that's going to be transpiring from this full moon. It's really the last full moon, I would say, of 2025, right? I know that we are technically in the calendar year of 2026, but we are on the verge of the next Chinese New Year, which is the year of the fire horse. And also too, I'm going to bring up, one second here, I'm going to bring up the, there we go. I'm going to bring up the flyer here for this reading for these personal forecasts so that people can see what is available, because we're going to be going not only into the Chinese New Year, starting on the 17th of February, the year of the fire horse. The Chinese New Year celebration is from new moon to full moon, but it's also in conjunction exactly with the next eclipse cycle. The annular or ring of fire solar eclipse on the 17th is also in the sign of Aquarius. We're going to talk a lot about Aquarius. I'm pretty sure we're going to talk a lot about Aquarius in this forecast. Because of a variety of things, but the first real new moon of the new year, which is the beginning of the Chinese New Year, like I said, the year of the fire horse, is going to be an Aquarius new moon that is going to be an annular solar eclipse. So these two cycles that are turning over, the eclipse cycle and then the Chinese New Year, are happening concurrently. They're happening at the same time, and so this is a very potent time. And so this full moon is really closing out a lot of cycles and taking us into new cycles, not only for a new year, but it's taking us into a new eclipse cycle, which is a 6-month cycle that is very deep. It has to do with the evolution of the soul. So I want to let people know that if you're interested in your own personal forecast, that I do have, let me share the screen here so that you can see what I'm talking about. It's limited availability, but I do have a couple more spots open for the Ring of the Fire Horse Eclipse Season personal forecast. So you could go to my website. It's in the description box below or on the social media page of whatever you're watching this on. And right on the homepage, you'll be able to access booking for this personal forecast. I am also offering a free month of Catalyst membership for anybody who books this reading. Once you book it and we start our correspondence through email, I will send you the discount code. And if you want to sign up for membership, you apply the discount code and that first month is free. And then if it doesn't work for you, if you find that you're like, this is cool, but I don't really see the need to have this monthly, then you just cancel it. So it's a good way to try it out and see if it's worth the value. So far, the people who are in the membership have been with me for a very long time, so they obviously do find value in it. So this, like I said, you just go to the homepage, catalystenergies.net. This is going to be right on the homepage, all the options of booking. If you are a part of Catalyst membership and you want to book this reading, you can use your discount code and get a deep discount on this forecast. So it is limited. I think there are only 2 or 3 spots left. So you may want to consider booking, because the first half of February is when I'm going to be doing these forecasts, because the new year, the year of the fire horse, the eclipse cycle, it all starts on the 17th of February. So with that being said, let's get into this, shall we? So we're going to have a full moon in Leo, right? The opposite of Aquarius. Now, we are very heavy in Aquarius season right now. Obviously, the sun is in Aquarius. We have Mercury in Aquarius. We have Venus in Aquarius. We have Mars in Aquarius. We have Pluto in Aquarius. And in fact, Mars and Pluto are still very much in a conjunction with each other. That was exact about 2 days ago. And is a very potent, very powerful when Mars and Pluto come together in a conjunction. Anytime anything comes into a conjunction, it's very activating. That doesn't always mean that it's very harmonious or balanced. It just means that it's activating. And when two bodies like Mars and Pluto, both ruling Scorpio, come together, it's very explosive. Now, the other part of that is that you can really take that energy and channel it into something very productive. And when we're talking about the sign of Aquarius, I mean, it can be into those ideal structures of the future, right? Aquarius represents the future, and it represents an ascended, awake humanity. It represents an ideal civilization, and outside of the box, right? You're transcending the material structures of Capricorn into something that is timeless and infinite in some ways, right? So the other side of Aquarius, which is just as present right now, and something that has been really coming up a lot, and I'm sure that many of us can look to the larger geopolitical stage, the social cultural stage, whatever, and even in our own personal lives, right? From the macro to the micro, you're going to see this at play as well, which is that the other side of Aquarius is basically the hive mind, right? That you are encased in the group think. And it's very difficult with so much Aquarius to pull yourself out of that if you don't have a lot of Leo, for instance, to balance that out. And so this Leo full moon is going to be one of those moments, I feel, that will highlight, the yearning of our soul for self-actualization, right? And there is it's like a propulsion, right? It's like shortcutting in some ways, just through the exercise of discipline and our own will to do so, to open our hearts and to experience that self-actualization at the soul level. The sun in Aquarius is at its weakest, okay? It wants to be in Leo. That's the home sign of the sun. So it's always difficult at this time of year when the sun is in the sign of Aquarius, because our own personal expression, our passions, our own sense of autonomy, and even just our voice, whatever that is, tends to be blended more into the collective. And that can be very difficult when your voice may be creating dissonance with the collective. Perhaps it's just getting drowned out. And with all this strong Aquarius energy, the fact that Uranus is going to station direct right after this full moon, like in the full moon period, itself, you can bet there is going to be some rapid, unexpected change that is going to trigger a lot of people and a lot of endings, okay? Uranus is in conjunction with the star Algol, and that's where it's going to station direct. Algol is the demon star. It is the head of the Gorgon. We talked about this actually in the last report. And for Uranus to station direct, to start moving, to start look like it's moving forward. It's all an illusion, right? It's all relative to perspective. No planet is moving backwards. It's all relative in terms of speed and position in the solar orbit. But when Uranus stations direct, those internalized types of rapid changes, those sudden insights, right? Those breakthrough moments that have been more internalized and we've been more reflective about, they're going to start rippling out into the collective. And when you're talking about Algol, you're talking about the head of the beast getting chopped right off, right? So it kind of depends too on what you identify as the beast, right? What is that toxicity that has been sitting on the surface of your life that is it just time to go, right? And I feel like, and I know for a fact, my own personal experience, that there are different things that are coming up that are showing us, they're mirroring to us what those things are. And Uranus is about how we awaken. And if, it's not always an easy situation, right? Enlightenment, Alan Watts, right, talks about enlightenment is one of the biggest disappointments to the ego, right? And that's probably more to do with the fact that, you walk through life and then you kind of wake up and then you still keep walking through life exactly the same way. But also too, Uranus will turn things on its head, right? It will turn things on its side, so it forces a different position. And yes, there may be sudden breakthroughs and insights. And when we're talking about Algol, we are talking about beheadings, right? And I'm not talking literally, although that can manifest in certain ways, right? There was a big Algol transit in July of 2024. When the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, there was all kinds of Algol stuff. Mars and Uranus, it was pretty clear. And the way that all played out, it was just laid out in the astrology of the people involved. So it can manifest in that way. And the fact that with the climate of everything else that's happening right now, it's really imperative that we are aware of the potential here. But when we think about, what is it in our own lives, right? What aspects need to be released, maybe dramatically, maybe a little violently, because we've been holding on to them for so long, right? What is the toxicity that has surfaced and has been sitting on the surface from our own trauma that needs to be released? And Uranus is going to turn things, in a direction that's going to kind of force the issue, and it's not going to be comfortable, right? There's lots of challenge ahead and things that are going to start solidifying. So people in the Catalyst membership know all about this because our last general reading was really just like, whoa, if you're coming if you're coming from a place where you are feeling like a victim and just kind of torturing yourself mentally over and over again, and you have this fire and this passion to do something about it, right? It's going to reach a resolution, but if it's coming from a place of feeling disempowered and disconnected from spirit, it's going to find its resolution regardless. It just might not be something that you necessarily want to embrace, or that you even are, there might be still some resistance to it, right? And there's a need for us to kind of slay our own dragon. And that is probably the best case scenario here for this next 2 weeks. And this full moon is going to be a big part of highlighting this for each of us, right? The soul, the living soul and its journey. So Lots of there's just a lot that's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, as if it's not already happening, but it's also going to be a more on the macro level. So one of the things that stood out to me is that with all of this late Aquarius energy, there's going to be, even in this next 2 weeks, consistent squares from the late Aquarius energy to the newly direct Uranus. And remember, Uranus is the ruling planet of Aquarius, okay? So it is already kind of like, hey, by the way, like this is kind of triggering like an awakening, even if it doesn't seem like it at first, because it's gonna, it's gonna ripple out through the collective. Well, the degree that all of these squares are going to happen, which is the Sun and Mercury and Venus, are all going to square Uranus over this next 2 weeks. It's all on the natal moon of the US chart. So I was like, it's been a while since I've looked at the US chart. So I opened the US chart just to kind of refresh myself. Where's the natal moon? What else is going on? And then I cast the progressions and I was like, wow, there is way more going on here now that I had no idea about. So we're going to take a minute and look at that chart so we get some perspective on how intense things are right now, and look at the actual temporal map that is just like, oh yeah, this is right on time. Not surprising at all. And Neptune is now in Aries. This is another thing that really stuck out to me. Neptune is now in Aries, right? And so this new impulse of something brand new, it's still very diffused, right? It's still kind of murky. Neptune is very broad. It is very much it's very idealistic in terms of how we feel. It's very spiritual in that way, but there's also a lot of fog, right, with Neptune. And so it is the undifferentiated, ocean of consciousness. And when Neptune came into Aries, it's already happened once, but it's not going to leave Aries. And something that we're going to talk about more in the Ring of the Fire Horse forecast. It'll certainly come up in anybody's personal forecast, but when I do the general forecast and post it, it's going to be in there as well, which is the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in this first degree of Aries. So Neptune, it's very diffused, right? Like there's no guarantees. Like things are starting to kind of emerge out of the formless with Neptune, but it's not clear. It's not differentiated. It's kind of formless. We kind of feel it. And it's very idealistic, but there's nothing substantial. Well, Saturn is going to have something to say about this. And Saturn is moving into Aries on the 13th of February, Friday the 13th, as a matter of fact. That's when things start to crystallize. Now, Saturn is at its fall position in Aries. It would rather be in Libra. And in fact, Saturn is in Libra in the U.S. natal chart. So, there will be a Saturn opposition with the U.S. Natal chart this year as well. Saturn moves through Aries. But when Saturn comes into Aries, the things that might have been like subtle and formless and undifferentiated, where we kind of feel it, but nothing is set yet, Saturn's going to come into Aries and be like, bam, there it is, right? This is the structure. And it's going to be a hammer dropping. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be, because Saturn is the gavel, right? It is the hourglass, right? It is the nature of time itself. It is the bones of any organization. And it's very powerful. That's happening in this next 2 weeks as well. Now, when Saturn and Neptune come together in a conjunction later, you're talking about something that hasn't happened since 593 BC or whatever. And I encourage you to look up what's, some historical, accounts that time period when the last time Saturn and Neptune were conjunct at the vernal equinox, okay? Because you'll find that there are some really interesting things happening, right? Neo-Babylonian, Near East kind of resituating itself. But the thing that really stuck out to me, and again, I encourage you to do some research on your own rather than me spoon feeding you everything, is that, there are some pretty powerful prophecies by the prophet Ezekiel in that year, 593 BC. And I think that they are incredibly relevant. You can see that this huge pattern has come back around again. And it's something that I think is worth investigating. And it's been sitting on my mind for since I discovered, because I was like, let's see here. What happened during this time? Oh, that's pretty interesting. I wonder if we're going to see some measure of connection here. Now, of course, Neptune coming into Aries just in general on its normal 165-year cycle, this was the Civil War, right? So, but Saturn coming into it is going to drop the hammer. It's going to crystallize. It's going to create a structure around this new impulse that is emerging collectively and individually. So it's going to be, you have Uranus stationing direct with Algol, and then you have Saturn coming into Aries again, and really crystallizing this new seed point of reality. Whereas up until this point, with Neptune coming into Aries, it has been, like I said, very diffused and kind of subtle, and we're just like, we can feel it, but, nothing is definite. Saturn is everything definite. There is no wiggle room with Saturn. It is just the pattern, the divine pattern, or the matrix, right? It just depends on how you look at it, right? It is the root system of the entire forest, and there is there's no destroying that without some significant effort. So those are big things that are going to be happening in the next 2 weeks. And so knowing, who we are and what we want to actualize at a soul level is going to be highlighted at this full moon. So first, let's take a look at the U.S. natal chart. I think it's really important to just kind of ground ourselves into what's happening here in the U.S. because I just kind of blew my mind a little bit. So let me exit out of a couple things here. All right. So number one, like I said, the moon, the U.S. natal moon at 28 degrees Aquarius. This is where everything is going to. So the Uranus is continued to be in a square to this point. So it has been a continual square between the soul of the country and the means in which it adapts to, especially because it's in the third house, adapts to the environment, and Uranus, which the progressed Uranus, the natal Uranus, and now the transiting Uranus, all in the sixth house of the U.S. chart, which is, the third house is your, how you adapt to your environment using your mind. So language and learning and communication. Information exchange, knowledge, right? And then the sixth house is how you actually put that into how does your resources function using that, right? The sixth house is, your works and labors, but it's really like, how do you get your shit together and actually create, a routine or a personal structure of action, right? The sixth house is like what you do every day. So, and to have Uranus here natally, and then to have Uranus, that means the U.S. is also going to have a Uranus return, which is an 84-year cycle, within the next couple of years as well in Gemini. So, when you have Uranus in the sixth house, there is personal reform that actually spreads out into the larger situation. And I would say with the U.S., it probably has a lot to do with the U.S. having that reform or that sudden breakthrough that is also going to ripple out to the rest of the world. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want to talk about this moon squaring the transiting Uranus on Algol, because the sun and Mercury and Venus are all going to sit on top of this moon and square Uranus. Okay, so there are going to be lots of challenges at the U.S. level in terms of the soul of the country and how it adapts to the immediate environment. And 28 degrees Aquarius is, if you look at the Sabian symbol of it, it is basically a stack of firewood. It's a tree that's been cut down, sawed up, and stacked into firewood. The idea here is that you put your effort into gathering what it is that you actually need for the future, because you have a semblance of intelligent foresight. It is the capacity to do this, right? And when you can't predict everything that's going to happen, that can really challenge that. So there are, even in the next 2 weeks, like I said, there's going to be challenges as the sun and Mercury and Venus all come to meet the natal moon of the US chart, and then squaring that now direct Uranus in the sixth house conjunct the demon star. So over and over and over. And squares in opposition are where we learn the most. They're uncomfortable, they're unresolvable, they are tense, they create friction. In the case of a square, it forces us to grow, right? Because it forces us into positions that we weren't already in, right? You're talking about cross purposes. You have moving into a 90-degree angle, and you're talking about fixed energy, right? Aquarius and Taurus are fixed signs. So they're very situated in where they are, and then they meet each other in this 90-degree angle. And so they're going to, one side could get crushed depending on the other angle, right? Or the other vector, I should say. So, but it's going to happen over and over and over, right? The sun representing our own personal expression, right? Mercury representing our minds, Venus representing what we value, right? And how we feel in our senses, over and over and over. And it's like we're going to be tested over and over and over in terms of these things, right? Do we have what it takes to really adapt to the world around us by using our intelligent foresight and planning ahead and doing the work, right? You chop wood and you carry water. You wake up and you chop wood and you carry water, right? Just like Alan Watts said, the enlightenment is the biggest disappointment to the ego. And this degree of 28 degrees of Aquarius is a perfect example of that process, right? You chop wood, you carry water. Uranus is going to be like, wake up, and we're going to chop wood. And so maybe the value, we were talking about Venus, right? The value of how we're implementing this is going to change. Maybe our strategy, or the way that we conceptualize it with Mercury, maybe that's going to have to adapt. And certainly with the sun in Aquarius, our personal self-expression, right? Who we are and how we express ourselves. This is the whole point of the full moon. It's going to highlight, that aspect for all of us, right? The soul yearning for self-actualization. The danger of Aquarius, though, is the hive mind capacity, right? That when you are steeped in Aquarius, you're talking about the ideal of the human experience, right? Of civilization. But the other side of that is the groupthink, the hive mind. And it's very difficult to find your voice amongst all of the other voices. And sometimes the only way to establish that is to be dissonant. And that's already happening, and probably will continue to happen. So this square really stuck out to me. Now, the other thing is some of the progressions that are just kind of blowing my mind right now. So, and I'm just going to point out some of these things that are going to be much more relevant they're certainly relevant now, and they're going to continue to be relevant in the weeks and months ahead. And then we'll move on to the current chart and start kind of looking at what to expect in the next 2 weeks. It's not all bad. What I'm saying is that there is incredible opportunity for growth and for change and for healing. But you have to be able, I would say, based on what I'm looking at here astrologically, you have to be willing to overcome your passions and teach from a place and access a place of deep wisdom. And not everybody is there. And so some people are going to experience their healing moments by being that teacher or that wisdom not keeper, but sharer based on their own experiences. Other people are going to have their kind of come to Jesus moment here, and they'll be healing from that. But the only way that we can do that is if we're sharing our experiences, and perhaps this full moon is going to be part of that as well. So the other things that really stand out about this chart, so on the inside of this chart, if you're unfamiliar, is the natal placements. The outside in the green are called your secondary progressions. So for every year that passes, the chart itself will move a day's worth, and you can see the natural evolution of all of these aspects? Well, the things that really stand out to me, number one, the progressed moon. Speaking of the moon, the progressed moon of the US is conjunct the natal Chiron in the fourth house, is opposite the progressed Mars. So you have a moon Mars opposition, regardless of its progressed, natal, transiting, draconic, whatever. A moon Mars opposition is very volatile, right? Because how you feel and how you want, and how you want to act, are in that tense aspect with each other. Now, the progressed Mars up here, that is pretty much sitting on top of Saturn in the 10th house, which is the professional profile, the career, the government, the institutions as a whole. That's what the 10th house represents. Mars in Libra, number one, is at its weakest, and number two is retrograde. So I think the progressed retrograde Mars in Libra is probably a blessing, because otherwise, when Mars is weak, it overcompensates. You know what I mean? And so when it's retrograde like this, I feel like that it kind of holds back a little bit from overcompensating when it feels weak. But it's also meeting the natal Saturn. And because it's retrograde, it's moving back. It's at 17 degrees Libra at this point. And so Mars and Saturn in a conjunction is very responsible, stabilized. Like our action is very grounded and rooted in power, but also responsibility and a structure and determination. And this is at the public level. The moon and the natal Chiron in the fourth house of the US chart, where the personal power comes from, boy, you can really see that unfolding right now. And will continue over the months ahead as the progressed moon moves to the Chiron and then passes it. So this volatility in terms of the power, where it's coming from, how it's released, is very present as well. The other thing that really stuck out to me is the fact that the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is pretty much happening for the most part on the fourth house. So you can bet that the US as a nation is going to be directly affected in terms of where our roots are to this transit that hasn't happened in thousands of years, right? You're talking, again, 593 BC. So you're talking like what, 2600 years roughly. So again, the nation is going through something very substantial. And then the last piece that really blew my mind as well is that the progressed Jupiter, which is right here, this green Jupiter here, is exactly where Jupiter is going to station direct, the transiting Jupiter as well, right? So there's all these overlaps right now with the U.S. natal chart that seems so incredible. And the transiting Chiron, by the way, is also in the fourth house. And we've talked about that too, that the U.S. is going through its Chiron return, right? And so those wounds, especially those wounds of self-identification, of courage, of boldness, of, self-worth, they're all getting pushed and poked and prodded right now, and a lot of it I feel like is, there's a lot of energy that wants to kind of come out swinging, because that is the nature of the natal Chiron of the U.S. chart in the fourth house. That the power comes from being willing to aggressively go out swinging, and this moon here, where it's situated, is giving us, I think, as a nation, an opportunity to emotionally and, in terms of our emotional landscape, be able to find some sort of rhythmic balance, right? And I've been talking about this for a while now. Like, we need to find ourselves as the hub of the wheel, because the wheel's going to keep spinning, but we need to find that stillness within ourselves. And that's going to be, I think, essential in order for this full moon in Leo to really highlight truly, the actualization of the individual soul. So The one last thing that I'm going to point out about this chart, because it's going to be relevant in the months ahead, is the nodes of the moon, right? This 6 to 7 degrees of Aquarius, and the fact that the natal Pluto, if you do evolutionary astrology, you've had a reading with me, you know that Pluto and the nodes of the moon are very connected to each other. The power of the soul, the trajectory of the soul, the history of the soul. This degree, when Pluto is transiting between the natal Pluto of the US chart and it will come into a conjunction within the next year or two with this south node of the US natal chart, where the soul of the nation has been and is coming out of, and propelling us into this degree of Leo, right? In the eighth house, which is shared resources, which is the subconscious, which is the power dynamics in the relationships at a social level. So this is going to come up a lot in the months ahead, this area of the resource of the US natal chart. So there is a lot happening right now that is related to this chart in particular. So it's no surprise that we're seeing things unfold the way they have been, and especially right now, and then coming into February and March, right? Especially when Jupiter stations direct, sitting right on top of the transiting Jupiter, the progressed Jupiter of the U.S. chart as well, which means Jupiter's going to come into the U.S., coming into the U.S. eighth house, and the energy of good fortune, of benevolence, of social value, of belief, understanding, right? Expansion into the bigger picture. Jupiter represents coming into the eighth house, I think, is going to be, there's going to be a lot of optimism about things like, banking and shared resources and debt versus, profit, that kind of thing in the eighth house. And all you have to do is just watch the stock market on a regular basis, how it corresponds to everything else happening. Certainly the precious metals, my gosh, like silver is at what, $112 an ounce. Gold is well over $5,000 an ounce, and it just keeps climbing. So, and it's not because they're being valued more, it's because the US dollar is tanking. But that's something that's been known for a while. So I wanted to point those things out just to show you like how much of what's happening is like part of the temporal landscape of this country. So with that being said, let's move into the current transiting charts and look at the 2 weeks ahead, shall we? And like I said, let's see here. Like I said, lots of Aquarius happening these days. Let's see. Let's make sure everything's formatted correctly. It looks like it is. All right. So this is the chart for the full moon itself, the full moon in Leo, and I thought I would read some of the Sabian symbols related to this full moon. So the sun at 13 to 14 degrees of Aquarius, and this is the inspiration for the imagery of the thumbnail, is a train entering a tunnel. And it represents, on some level, like I said, kind of, I don't want to say shortcutting, but kind of penetrating through those obstacles and what those demands require, which is self-discipline, physical will, mental acuity, all of those things of Aquarius. This is a gift for meeting those demands on various potentials, right? And it does represent like a cutting through in some ways, but the cutting through has already happened because the tunnel already exists. It's the train of humanity, for instance, or the human potential moving through. Now, the dark side to this, or the other side to this degree, is basically just conforming to limitation and just accepting, what is, without really putting ourselves forward, right? And sometimes, and right now, it can feel like that. It can feel like that you're just up against insurmountable odds. And I would say that Uranus stationing direct right after this is going to flip the script in a way that is going to open up potential, right? Again, that algol energy of where Uranus is in alignment with, and it's also, by the way, in the Pleiadian star cluster as well, like Uranus is right there. It's the potential here for something to give us that sudden breakthrough. And that's the thing. Maybe there is something blocking the way, right? Maybe it is difficult for each of us emotionally and for our soul to really break through that which we are yearning to do or to be or how to express ourselves. Because 14 Leo is a human soul seeking opportunities for outward manifestation. And so perhaps those opportunities are the overcoming of a challenge. Perhaps those opportunities are that sudden insight, or that break comes from that sudden insight or breakthrough of Uranus stationing direct. Maybe something is getting cut off, getting cut off completely that we've been carrying around and didn't even realize it. And I would say, personally, just based on my own stuff, that that Mars-Pluto conjunction that is still very present is showing us exactly that right now and giving us the opportunity to see those things for what they are, right? Because I think a lot of us still are carrying around old stuff that we don't even realize we're still carrying around, and it is influencing the way that we interact with our reality, which is going to also have an impact on the way that we manifest. You know what I mean? So a human soul seeking opportunities for outward manifestation. Leo is about the heart. And so there's a yearning for self-actualization. So I have a feeling here that this full moon is going to highlight, what it is that we want and what we want to manifest, and maybe what's in the way, right? And so this degree at its best is an absolute wholeheartedness of participation in whatever it is that we're doing. But the other side of the spectrum of this is basically procrastinating or just not having any genuine enthusiasm. And that's the downside of Aquarius, is just getting lost in the how loud the collective voice really is. And if you see no hope here, then you get lost in that tunnel, right? And so there may even be a highlighting of this lack of enthusiasm or this procrastination. Whatever it is, this full moon is really going to highlight what is in our way, what we allow to be in our way, and where we feel disempowered. And if anything, it's going to also increase or just enhance that yearning for self-actualization. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be necessarily positive, right? Again, we're talking about algol here with Uranus stationing direct. You know what I mean? Sudden cutting off of something, right? And that's not easy. There is a lot of energy of bereavement that is associated with this degree of Taurus, right? Is 27, 28 degrees. But the other side of that is that there is a capacity to really be able to see the whole picture here. And isn't that what we started this lunar cycle with, is the capacity to read the room, to read the writing on the wall, to actually see the underlying meaning of the whole pattern in its fullness? I mean, that's what true clairvoyance really is. It's not about seeing the future so much as you see the whole pattern. And so all possibilities are shown to you. And just like when I do the readings with people, the card readings, you're getting a snapshot of what is in that moment and all of the potentials that surround it. So this is the full moon in Leo, right? And from here, we're going to have, on the 2nd, is going to be our first kind of mental moment of healing potential. And this has to do with the connections that are going to happen with Chiron. Now, Chiron's moved into the next degree of Aries. So 23 to 24 degrees of Aries is an interesting Sabian symbol. It is a window, these curtains that are blown inward, and they take the shape of a cornucopia. That's the Sabian symbol. And what it represents is the the openness to the influx of spiritual energies, right? That the wind is blowing and that's the spiritual energies, right? So the windows have to be open, right? There has to be an invitation to some extent. Now, when we're talking about Chiron, we're talking about the wounded healer. So for those who have felt cut off by from spirit, right? This again goes back to the last membership reading that I did, right? If you're cut off from spirit, if you feel like that, spirit is not guiding you through life, those windows are shut. So you're not going to get this influx of spiritual energies. And perhaps that has to do with all kinds of past traumas and issues, right? And that's what Chiron represents, that which we have to transcend out of in order to reach our spiritual potential. Now, the degree of Aquarius that the Mercury's in that's going to sextile, as you can see here. And you can see that Lilith is involved in this conversation now, which is actually, and actually this forms a kite with the moon. If we go back a couple hours, you're going to see that it forms a kite, which is a lot of potential energy, right? Yes, there is tension, but there's also the opportunity to fly. So this is the first moment of potential healing. And 24 Aquarius is about constructive use of past difficult experiences. They can be used as examples for those who are still going through that process or is trying to overcome, their inflamed passions that led them to difficult past experiences to begin with. So for some people, this is going to be a teaching moment. And that's the other thing about Chiron, is the wounded healer. Chiron was a healer. Chiron was a teacher. And so part of coming out of our own wounds and closing them out is being able to assist people and facilitate healing and teaching other people who are going through similar things that we ourselves were able to kind of come out of. So this Mercury in Aquarius sextile Chiron, you have Lilith involved here over in Sagittarius, which is a very deep, almost primal connection to optimism and trust and a sense of good fortune, if we're going to talk about Sagittarius. So there is lots of potential right here. And this is not the only opportunity. You're going to have Venus and the Sun come into this sextile with Chiron. So for all the difficulties that are happening, there's a lot of potential for healing and to facilitate healing and guidance to other people in this situation. But it really has to do with your constructive use of difficult past experiences. It can be an example for people who are going through the process, okay? So that's the first one. The first instance, right? Mercury sextile Chiron right after the full moon. So this is the third, which is Tuesday. This is when Uranus stations direct. This is also when the moon meets the south node as well. So the moon meets its own south node. So there is a deep intuitive connection to where the soul has been, which is at 10 degrees Virgo, is about being able to look past the duality, right? And so there's a connection to that. You don't want to get stuck in that place. You want to recognize that there is a power to be gathered from the South Node to propel you at a soul level forward. So as Uranus is stationing direct and making, within this week, you're going to find something that kind of just comes out sudden, right? Sudden breakthrough, flash of insight, an actual event having to do with, physicality, material security and comfort, right? All of these Taurus things, even just what we value, that's going to go through some type of rapid shift or sudden shift. And this connection with the moon and the south node in Virgo is an emotional connection to the mastery at a soul level for being able to look out past the duality. And I think that's going to have a really important impact in how we manage all of this, right? And we're still in the full moon phase. That's the thing. The full moon comes and we're still in that phase of the soul yearning for self-actualization. So The next stage right after this is Venus sextile Chiron, and this is going to be on the 4th. And I suspect that, when it was Mercury, it was very mental. There's communication, there is conceptualization from a mental standpoint, how we think about it, what we say about it. Even in Aquarius, right? Maybe the collective voice. With Venus, it's going to be way personal, right? It's going to be about our healing for relationships, that which we value in terms of humanity as a whole. So another instance of like, oh, this is an opportunity to really experience not only healing, but to allow spirit to move through our lives and to provide opportunities for healing. So again, it may on the surface not necessarily be really comfortable. It might be really challenging, but what we're going to find here is its opportunities. Now remember, sextiles, 60-degree angles, you need to participate. They're not like trines where they just are foundationally supportive and you don't have to do anything. Sextiles are like, hey, here's all of the elements that allow for a harmonious transformation, but you actually have to put some effort into it. And I think that the positions where with Chiron in Aries in particular is where we have to allow spirit to move through us, move into our lives, be open to that influx of energy, and then we can find the healing, the new framework mentally with Mercury, the new value of the healing and the overcoming of past difficult situations with Venus. Now, it gets a little dicey after this because then Mercury squares Uranus. And remember what I talked about, right? Where the 28 degrees here of Aquarius is going to then be brought up to the surface here, and it's going to have an impact on the soul of the country, right? Where the natal moon of the US chart is. And so again, the tree that's been felled and sawed into firewood, there's a sense of intelligent foresight, there's a sense of immediacy, and there's a desire to be at work or to mobilize things for our own interests, right? It's going to be challenged by this position of Uranus at Algol that's going to be like, well, we're going to just chop off the head here and really create some friction in terms of being able to mobilize what it is that you need. If anything, it's going to reinforce the immediacy of mobilizing everything around us in order to, have what we need. So that's going to be on, let's see, the 5th of February, right? So that's next Thursday. So that energy is going to start growing. The moon will be in Libra at that point. We'll be in a disseminating moon phase, which means that the message is now being disseminated, right? The information, the awareness, the clarified purpose of the full moon is now at a point where we are taking that experience and applying it to our personal experience as the light of the moon is waning. So it's much more of a conscious application of that which has been revealed to us with the full moon, if that makes sense. And so that's going to be, I have a feeling that that's when we're going to start like really thinking ahead. Okay, this is what I need to do. This is how I need to, how do I mobilize my resources? What is it that it needs to immediately be dealt with? That kind of thing, right? And again, it's going to change our, I think, with Uranus stationing direct and then all these squares, it's going to change our priorities, honestly, in terms of what is immediate and what needs to be mobilized. I do feel that way. So that's going to be late next week on the 5th when we start seeing that. The moon will be in Libra. Mercury then will enter Pisces. And then on the 8th, as we're moving into the 3rd quarter, which is going to be Scorpio, then Venus is going to square Uranus. So we're going to see these themes all over again. But it's going to be way, like I said, with Venus involved, it's way more personal. It's way more in terms of our comfort, our security, our senses, our values. It's going, with Mercury, it was much more of like using the mind. Now it's going to be a lot closer to home, more palpable, more visceral, and more value based in terms of what we value when it comes into a square with Uranus. So there could be relationship instability, there could be traditions that break off, but there could also be creative breakthroughs, financial surprises, right? Perhaps we'll find here that, people have some surprises with tax season. I'm not really too sure about that, but I mean, it is a possibility. On the 11th is when the sun comes into that sextile with Chiron. So even our own voice is going to go through, our own sense of personal initiative and expression is also going to go through that opportunity for healing with the sun sextile Chiron. The other thing too is Mercury now in Pisces is about to meet the North Node. So we're about to have a very mental and cognitive sense of where the soul is headed, right? And I think that's going to be pretty interesting while this sun sextile Chiron is happening. Now, it's on the 13th that Saturn enters Aries, as I talked about earlier. So that's that's Friday the 13th. So something's gonna probably go down around that time, I would imagine. So sorry about that. Let's get this formatted a little bit better. There we go. Okay. Oh, I see. There we go. So we talked about that a bunch already. And so the last real big transit before we get into the solar eclipse, the year of the fire horse, all of that stuff is on the 16th, the day before. So we're coming into our balsamic moon period at that point on the 16th. The sun will square Uranus. So another one of these squares, right, is just going to be different aspects of who we are going through this process over and over and over again. But the other piece of it that I think is really beneficial is that Mercury is going to trine Jupiter, which is going to really balance the mental aspect with our understanding. And this particular transit with Pisces and Cancer, of course, it's going to be very feeling oriented. It's going to be very spiritual. We're talking about the water signs here, but specifically, this is about getting into a place where we are trusting and relying on our inner source of inspiration or guidance as we are still working with the bigger picture of personality integration into the spaces in which we feel safe and secure and where we belong, right? So there is a real need at this point, I think that's highlighted by this trine, this Mercury-Jupiter trine, which are normally in opposition to each other. Mercury rules Gemini, Jupiter rules Sag. When these two are in a favorable aspect, like a trine, a water trine, it does suggest to me that there is something very stable as long as we are able to tap into that inner source of guidance. If, and that will stabilize our own internal understanding of how to integrate ourselves into, this, what I'm feeling like is a whole new picture of our nation and where we belong and our shared resources. Remember, I said that the transiting Jupiter is pretty much sitting right on top of the progressed Jupiter of the U.S. chart, which is right in the 8th house, right on that 8th house cusp. So, and that's, again, shared resources, power dynamics, rather than getting caught up in what we are being shown in the various means of communication, right? Mass media, social media, even other people's perspectives that we're surrounded by. This is really highlighting the need for all of us to, rely on that inner source of inspiration. This is why these Chiron transits, I feel, are really important, because if we allow spirit to move through our lives and allow ourselves the influx of spiritual energies and inspiration, even if we are dealing with past traumas and wounds around those types of things, it's in that situation that type of situation will then allow us to trust that inner guidance. And our, things can be kind of dicey with Mercury and Pisces, there's no doubt, right? I mean, because the mind is just kind of swimming in everything, but this degree is about tapping into the muse essentially, and that inner source of inspiration, rather than being solely influenced by everything around us. But there is a possibility for that if you are ungrounded and you are not working on yourself on a regular basis. So, my friends, I'm going to leave it there for this forecast. So, we're going to stop sharing and I'm going to come over here and we're going to close out. So, again, thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so much. Be sure to interact with the content if you do find it valuable. Like I said, it helps the channel grow. It reaches more people. More people can come into membership. More people can come into receiving services. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing. Year of the Fire Horse, the Ring of the Fire Horse, I should say. If you're interested in your own personal forecast, it will be a 6-month forecast. You can go to my website in the description box below and book it right from the homepage, or go to the store. It's under astrology readings, the tab astrology readings, and you can book it from there. And once you do that, I'll reach out through email and we'll get started, especially if you're new, because it will require a little bit of extra legwork to get your birth details and figure out what's going on. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you. Enjoy the full moon. Enjoy the last half of the lunar cycle of this year. And just keep an eye out for the next report, which is going to be the eclipse year of the Fire Horse seasonal general forecast. And that's going to be released, around the 17th, soon around that time. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to happen. I'm prioritizing the membership, and certainly anybody who books the forecast, the personal forecast, I'm going to be prioritizing them. So, but I will be posting something for the eclipse season and the year of the Fire Horse. So take care, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other the best that you can. And I'll see you on the flip side. Later.